All right, guys, welcome back to another video. This time I'm going to be going over my line 2 weapons. In the last video, I did the line 2 gear, which is what supports these weapons. So now I'm actually going over the weapons themselves so you can kind of see why I'm running the gear the way I am, and also just kind of some details on the weapons themselves. So first off, I kind of want to, as I go through these videos, I definitely drop a lot of brand names so that you guys, if you're interested, can check out those products if they might help you, and determine if they'll help you guys out. But nobody sponsors me. Nobody's sponsoring this video. I've bought all this stuff with my own money. Nobody's given it to me or anything like that. I don't get any kickbacks. And then secondly, it's not my first rodeo when it comes to running rifles. I've packed a lot of weapons in a lot of places, not just rifles, and I've got a little bit of experience. I'm a rifle marksmanship instructor. I was in the Marine Corps as well. And, so you can take what I'm saying with a grain of salt, of course, but I'm not just making this stuff up. And so, at the end of the day, it's worth what you pay for it. But I just wanted to kind of get that out there because I just share this information. I'm not trying to get paid or anything. I'm really just kind of doing this as a service, through the training that I've taken part in the past, and also the training that I've conducted as an instructor myself. I've met a lot of great people. And so I put this information out there for those kind of people because, I just want to give good people good skills. And if you find yourself in a similar type of environment or situation and this information helps you, then I'm happy. Not everything in life is a square range, is a flat range. And there's a lot of information out there that seems to be oriented in that direction. I call it the raid mentality. There's not much thought given to the sustainment side of things. A lot of people think they're just going to throw their gear on and that's all there is to it. Like there's going to be a Black Hawk that's going to pick you up and take you to go do a raid, and then you get to go back to the base at the end. And that's not really what I plan on doing. It's not my mentality. I live in a very rural area, and so backcountry and rural patrolling are very different from operating in an urban area, and I've done both, so I know what I'm talking about here. So before we get to start talking about the weapons themselves, I want to introduce a concept. And in my blog that I've been writing for the last 3 or 4 years, anytime there's been a gear discussion, what rifle should I get? What scope should I get? What backpack should I get? Whatever. I always try to direct people back to a concept that I learned as a Marine called METT-TC. And it's a planning tool that we use, a planning, decision-making tool where we kind of analyze some factors to help us come up with the best course of action. Now, you can read more about this. There's a publication on my blog in the library, and I'll link to it in the description. It's Marine Corps Tactical Publication 3-01A, Scouting and Patrolling, and they get into all that. And so I definitely would encourage you to check that out. And so real quick, I'll just kind of give a high-level overview of METT-TC. It's an acronym, of course, and the M stands for mission. And, mission is simply, what am I trying to accomplish? Am I out hunting? Am I patrolling for security? What am I out here doing? The E is enemy. What threats are out there? Who is my perceived enemy, and what threats might I face? The next T, or the first T rather, and you can mix up the order. I like to do it in this order because it's kind of how I think, is troops available. And that's what support will I have and who supports me. And, so I know this is troops and mission. It's all like military terminology, but if you just kind of think about it for a second, troops available could be, who's helping me out and who can I rely on? All right. Who's going to be with me while I'm doing this mission? The next T is time available. How much time do I have to accomplish my goal? If it's something that has to be done in the next 12 hours, I can't really allow myself to be distracted by something else, right? I got to focus on that and get it done within that timeline. Whereas if I have, say, 4 days to accomplish my objective, then maybe I can allow other things, I can divert my attention to other things for a little bit. The next T is terrain and weather. What terrain will I be in? What will the weather be while we're out? How will that affect my mission? If you're out on a 4-day foot patrol and the first 2 days is sunny and 65 and the last 2 days is rainy and snowy and 20 degrees, you're going to have some challenges to deal with the latter half of your patrol. And then the last letter is C, which is for civilian concerns. And that's how I learned it. I've seen other variations, and if you Google this stuff, you will find a few different variations. This is how I utilize it for myself. So civilian concerns, how will the locals view me and what I'm doing? And so if I just decide today that I'm going to do a security patrol around the block in full kit, what kind of civilian concerns might there be? If I'm going to be walking past the elementary school 5 blocks away, then, if I'm in full kit with a rifle walking near an elementary school, so people might view that negatively, so that might bring unneeded attention to me, right? So civilian concerns, it could be in a rural context if you're out of town. How do the people who own the land or live out there, what's their point of view? Are they supportive of whatever you're doing? Are they antagonistic? Is it a permissive or non-permissive environment? Okay. So that's METT-TC. And so when I introduced each rifle, I kind of sat down and wrote a kind of a quick METT-TC analysis for each rifle, kind of hopefully give you guys the context of what this rifle will be doing for me, hopefully. All right, so the first is just what I'm going to call my fighting rifle. And it's a 5.56 AR-15, nothing fancy. All right, so the METT-TC. Okay, so the mission for this rifle is combat and reconnaissance patrols in contested or hostile situations. All right, combat patrols are your raids, your ambushes, your security patrols, and your contact patrols. Okay, and once again, you can learn about all this in that book I linked to earlier. And reconnaissance patrols are route, area, and zone. Okay, so a lot of times you're probably going to be doing more than one of those combined. At least that's my own experience. It's not uncommon to run a security patrol while also, say, of a roadway, while also basically doing reconnaissance of that. All right. And that could turn into a contact patrol if suddenly, while you're patrolling that route, you make contact with somebody from the civilian population, and maybe they need your help with something. So, you got to be flexible. That's why I like this rifle. It's very flexible. It's not a long range precision gun. It's a 5.56. But what it allows for me, is I can defend myself very well with one of these. All right. All right. So let's go to enemy. That's the E. So my enemy, if I'm packing this, it's because I'm worrying about other human beings. Okay. I'm not worried about hunting. I'm not worried about wild animals. I'm worried about bad guys. Okay. And primarily, foreign supported fighters or other organized criminal elements, a large group of bad guys, especially with this. Okay. Troops available, hopefully, a small force of trained irregular volunteers. Okay. And I emphasize trained here because that allows us to do certain tactics, apply fire and maneuver in a certain way where, a high round count, high capacity rifle like this, especially if you have 4 or 5 people armed with them, can be very effective. Okay. The time available, typically the type of mission that I train for, that I teach people to train for, is you're basically unsupported, living off the land and out of your pack for 4 to 5 days. Okay. Terrain and weather. I live in the Rocky Mountain region, so it's going to be high desert, badlands, pine forests. Weather is going to be anywhere from negative 30, 40 degrees below zero up to 120 degrees. That's kind of the wide range there. And, everything from snow to rain to sunshine. Okay. So civilian concerns, right now, my primary civilian concerns is just that somebody's going to get freaked out and call the cops, or they're going to see this and they're going to remember it because it's, even for an AR, it doesn't look like a normal AR. It looks pretty conspicuous. And so I don't like drawing unnecessary attention. And so that's why I choose not to carry this rifle unless I need to. Now, if I'm going to go out and train, I have a private training area and I can do a lot of stuff out there. But otherwise, I'm not just going to pack this around unnecessarily. Basically, it's too commando looking. So, like I was saying, this rifle is primarily used for defense and offense versus human targets. Okay, I'm going to be working within a team, and we're going to be applying appropriate tactics to the situation. Okay. Of course, the AR favors lightweight, high round count. I can carry a lot of ammo. It's not hard to carry 7 full mags, 210 rounds of ammo. And you can easily carry a lot more, of course, too. With this rifle, I'm not worried about long range fire or energy or knockdown power. I'm really worried about that 500 yards and in. As I'm editing this video, I think there's a point that I kind of failed to emphasize here, and that is basically the main reason I'm going to grab my AR is if I feel that I'm going to need to do fire and maneuver. All right. And fire maneuver, whether it's during an immediate action drill or if we're conducting an assault or a raid or an ambush, whatever the situation is, I need a lot of firepower. I need to be able to suppress and outmaneuver whoever I'm going up against. And that's why I'm going to pick this AR-15 with its, high ammo capacity. I can shoot it very quickly. Granted, it's not a machine gun or anything like that, but I can still put a lot of rounds down and put somebody's head down when I need to. It's also easy to tailor to any mission. Right now I've got it set up for rural patrolling, but if for some reason I thought I would be in some sort of, I don't know, vehicular scenario or urban scenario, it's not that hard to change optics and have something that maybe will be a little more effective in that type of environment. With this particular build, this is not a pure mil-spec build. It's got some other parts in it that, I primarily was focused on reliability, but also trying to keep weight to a minimum. The type of ammo, it is a 5.56, but since I'm not governed by the Geneva Conventions or anything, I can run a lot of different ammo varieties in here. So I do run a 62 grain hollow point bullet, not a boat tail hollow point. But all right, so on the rifle up front, I've got my Silencer Co. Flashhider suppressor mount. It's the old trifecta mount for the Silencer Co. Saker. They don't make these anymore, but I've got a bunch of them and they all work well. For the handguard, I've got a Midwest Industries free floated M-LOK rail. Just has the pick rail across the top. You'll notice I don't really use too many bolt-on rails if I can help it. For a weapon light, I've got the Insight WML HSP, the one that Travis Haley had input on. I really like this light because it's very easy to quick detach. It's got a built-in mount and the button is built in as well. So I don't have any wires, cables, pressure switches, which is great because normally I don't leave the weapon light on. It'll be in my gear. The weapon light is only here. To me, it only serves really one purpose, and that's if I have to clear any structures or other close quarter type obstacles. I still prefer a white light. I have a PVS 14, and I've definitely patrolled and used a PVS 14 a lot. But for pure situational awareness in close quarters, I would much rather have both eyes open with a white light versus a monocular. Because once the shooting starts, you're not a ninja anymore, and all that night vision stuff is going to go away pretty quickly. So to me, I'd rather just run a white light, because if you go back to my mission where I'm talking about rural patrolling, CQB is not part of that. I'm not an HRT. I don't know of any irregular type people, which is basically everybody who's not being paid by the government to train and carry a rifle. You're all irregulars. I don't know if you knew that or not. And so CQB doesn't really fit in the irregulars paradigm. You're not going to flood a building with people typically. And I mean, at least I'm not going to. So anyways, that's why I'm not real worried about keeping a weapon light on all the time. Next, I've got my VTAC sling, and I'm using a Blue Force Gear. I think it's called a U-loop. Let me look here. I've got it on my notes. Yeah, Blue Force Gear U-loop. So it's a very secure mount. There's no threaded fasteners, nothing to come loose, jiggle loose. I don't care for QD sockets. I've seen too many of those fail. And so for my slings, I like, a well-attached, highly reliable sling mount. Typically one made of the webbing and buckles versus some little piece of hardware that can get jammed up with dirt and fall apart. All right, and like I said, I've got a VTAC ultralight sling. Okay, coming back on the left side, I've got the Perst 4 high power laser, infrared and visible. And I've got it mounted back here. I know in the past some people have had some heartburn over where I put my IR laser, like it matters to them. But I put it here because when you're in a rural or field environment, you're not getting in a firing position like this. This is not a firing position. All right. There's no cover and concealment. I mean, unless you're behind a concrete wall or something like that. But typically, I'm going to be taking cover behind whatever I can find. And having this right here allows me to engage it with my free hand. And I don't have any cables or pressure switches to snag up or accidentally push or get broken. Okay. You'll notice that I like to keep things very simple. I don't want a bunch of extra BS on my rifles. Okay. And I'll talk about the camouflage on its own here in a minute, but moving back on the receiver, I've got the American Defense Recon mount, and I've got the primary arms 1:8 platinum 34 millimeter tube. This is the original platinum. I don't think they make this one anymore. It's an awesome optic. The 1:8 power allows me to do everything from up close work out to 650, 700 yards with this rifle. Now, I will say this, at 650, I'm not, hitting 100% of my rounds, but it's not too bad either. So that's why I have this bubble level, because at those distances, with a 5.56, after you've compensated for range and wind, the next thing to throw you off is going to be how level the rifle is. All right. This is also a great optic because the way the turrets adjust, you just lift them, and you can adjust them. So when I run my suppressor, I can just add 5 clicks of elevation and then relock the turret, and it's not going to move. And then if I want to take my suppressor off, just take those 5 clicks out, relock the turret. The charging handles, the Bravo Company gunfighter with the medium latch. I've got quite a few of those. I really like them. And then the bolt carrier is a Sharps Rifle Company, what's it called? The high reliable or extreme performance bolt carrier with the DLC coating. And I run Rand CLP on that. I did forget to mention the barrel, of course. It's a 16-inch Hansen profile ballistic advantage 1-in-7 twist, medium length gas system. And I prefer the 5.56 over the 223 Wild. My last AR had a 223 Wild, and it shot awesome, very accurate, but it seemed like that rifle needed more cleaning. And so I went back to the 5.56 chamber just for a little bit of reliability. Like I said, primarily with this build is reliability and light, cutting weight where I can. So that's why I went with a thinner profile barrel, and the 5.56 chamber is, to hopefully cut the weight and be more reliable than the barrel I had previously. Lower receiver, it's just a primary, not primary arms, Palmetto State lower receiver, Geisley G2S trigger, all standard fire controls. I don't like running all the, fancy extended whatnots on this stuff. I have multiple ARs and I like them all to be set up the same. And these controls work for me. Got the Magpul MIAD, MIAD grip on there, and the Magpul MOE stock. I really like fixed stocks, kind of same reason. I don't like a bunch of moving parts and hardware, and I don't really need a collapsible stock. I'm not running a bunch of body armor and stuff, so not really worried about that. And fixed stocks for me are very familiar. Whole time I was in the Marines, I ran an M16A2 or an M16A4, which both used the same stock. And I do have an A2 butt stock, and I might play around. I'm going to weigh these. I want to weigh this versus the A2, and whichever one's lighter is probably what I'll end up changing to, just to hopefully shed a few ounces. And then for magazines, I've got a ton of GI mags, but I also really like the Gen 3 PMags. The Gen 2s I've had issues with. I have a ton of Gen 3s, haven't had any issues. Now, real quick, I want to point something out. In my last video, I had this upper on this lower, and I wasn't really talking about rifles. I was talking about gear, but a viewer pointed out rather rudely and had some comments about this polymer lower, and we had a little bit of words back and forth. But what it did, it got me to thinking about the fact that if he saw the polymer lower, even though I wasn't talking about rifles, I think he took a lot out of context, but other people might also. So this is a KE Arms KP15 polymer lower, and I've been just doing some T&E work with this, and I'm not. What's sad is sometimes people see something on the internet and they think, oh my gosh, that's what I'm going to go with because that guy did it. Make sure you test and evaluate all your gear yourself. That's why I can recommend this setup, because I have done that. Or this, I'm still working on it. Okay, so if you saw that, I like it. I haven't had any issues with it. But I did just recently see a video where guys are breaking theirs kind of in this region in cold weather, and I'll link to that video. I'm not trying to run this product down, but I do think it's something that people need to know about, because I did call KE Arms. I live in Montana, so obviously cold weather is something of a concern for me. And I actually talked to Russell Fagan personally, and he assured me that this is rated for, and I forget the temperature, I honestly do, but much colder weather than what the guys were dealing with in that video when theirs broke. So anyways, this is going to hang out. I'm just going to be doing kind of some experimenting with it. And next winter, when it's very cold, I'll take it out and do my own testing and see what I think of it for sure. But I just kind of wanted to clear the air on the polymer lower thing. So that's pretty much it on the fighting rifle. I think it's just a good kind of an SPR type setup, which for me, I need to be able to shoot. Like I said, 500 yards is not a long shot where I live. All right. So it does very well for that. Next is what I call the practical bush rifle. And now this is just my practical bush rifle. I did a whole series of videos on the concept of the practical bush rifle. And, if you want to check that out, and you may have your own practical bush rifle already. All right. But I'm not going to get into that too in depth here. So let's talk about the METT-TC for this thing. The mission, spot and stalk mule deer hunting, what me and my buddies call deer patrol. We'll go down deer patrols and we're just going to, spot and stalk deer. So this lightweight, handy rifle is really great for that. I also use it a lot for my own personal backcountry training and recreation. If I want to take a rifle with me, but I don't necessarily want to look all kitted out like a commando, just like in the Line 2 gear video, I talked about the defensive hunter gear. A rifle like this fits in very well with that. And it's just a good general purpose kind of go-to rifle. So what's my enemy? I'm going to say aggressive wild animals up to, black bear sized animals. We're not talking about taking out grizzlies, but where I live, there's black bears, there's mountain lions, there's been some wolves, coyotes, and also larger elk and moose that, if you get in the wrong spot, they can be aggressive as well. But we also have, where with the fighting rifle, I was worried about organized criminal elements. With this, I'm more worried about your day-to-day disorganized criminal elements. A couple tweakers with a meth lab hidden out in the woods. Troops available, it's going to be just myself and maybe one or two others. Whoever's doing a little training with me that day, maybe we're going to go for a hike, practice some land nav, whatever. So it's just going to be me and a couple buddies. Time available, I still like to plan for 4 to 5 days unsupported. So that doesn't really affect the rifle too much, other than, I want something lightweight and easy to carry, because after a few days, I don't want to be packing around a 15-pound rifle all the time if I don't absolutely need to. Terrain and weather, same thing. Rocky Mountain, high desert, badlands, pine forests, -20 to 120 degrees Fahrenheit, rain, snow, or shine. All right. So it needs to be tough. It needs to be able to be out in those weather conditions. Civilian concerns again, those curious landowners or maybe other people that are out hiking around or hunting, they're just curious. And I don't like to stand out. I don't want something that really jumps out at people. A decked out AR probably does do that. And so with this rifle, I'm specifically not trying to stand out by looking too tactical, but also by not being flashy. Just kind of general colors, nothing crazy. Got some earth tone on the rifle, but no spray paint, no camo patterns, nothing like that. If I ever wanted to use this rifle in a tactical situation, give me 2 minutes with a rattle can and I'll have it blending in just fine. All right. So some specs on this rifle. It's a Ruger American Ranch Gen 1 now, that they've got Gen 2 out, in 6.5 Grendel. It's a compact and handy rifle that packs a pretty good punch. 6.5 Grendel's no slouch, even though it's little. And with this 10-round magazine loaded, this setup right here, as you see it, weighs about 8 3/4 pounds. So not ultra light, but pretty handy. Starting up at the front, once again, I've got my Silencer Co. Flashhider and suppressor mount. So I can run that same suppressor that I can run on my AR. It's a 30 cal suppressor, so I can run it on all my rifles. I've got a small front Picatinny rail. This is great I run a quick detach bipod that mounts up here, and I don't like to leave it mounted all the time. So, it gives me a spot to mount that, but also a TLR1, Streamlight TLR1 works really great here as a weapon light. You can just mount it right here. Excuse me. I went ahead and had the barrel fluted to reduce weight and to kind of bring the rifle into a good balance. Going further back, like I already showed, it feeds from a detachable magazine. I've got a Skinner Sights scout rail on here with fixed iron sights. So the rifle's always useful whether it has an optic or not. But it's a full-length Picatinny rail, just like the top of an AR. So I can run a multitude of optics on here, everything from a small red dot to a conventional higher powered scope to a prism optic like an ACOG, to this. Right now I've got this scout scope on here, kind of once again doing some T&E work. I'm not standing here saying you got to run a scout scope, so don't get your panties in a twist. All I'm saying is I have a scout scope on it because I like to practice with different things to evaluate whether it's a concept or an item that will work for my needs, which is what you should be doing as well. It is a bolt action, so that way, it doesn't quite jump out doesn't scream commando, hopefully. I did modify this rifle with an extended magazine release. This is a Magpul mag release. Makes getting the magazine out a lot easier. I've got a Triad tactical stock pack with a couple ballistic data cards, some maintenance equipment, all inside. I just like having that stuff on board with the rifle because I view each rifle as its own kind of subsystem, and so I like to have that stuff with it. The Sling is a Magpul MS1 that I run backwards, and what that allows me to do, is run it basically as a Rhodesian sling, which a Rhodesian sling is just a 2-point sling with a loop in the front for your support arm. It's a shooting sling. Basically, what I can do with that is put my support arm through the loop, bring that buckle up tight on my bicep, take my hand, wrap it around the front of the sling, and now I've got a pretty good shooting support, that I can shoot from right here. It's quite stable. I mean, I could, especially with this lightweight rifle, I could be here all day. Well, not all day, but you get my point. It's very, very comfortable. And then on the back, I've got a Triad tactical down under support And I've made things like this in the past, and then I saw Triad making this one, and I really like how they've done this. And it's just a stiffened section that it's a bunch of Velcro webbing that you then put this wrap around it. It just gives a stiff section to utilize kind of as a rear support while you're shooting prone, like off of a bipod, and it works quite well. So that's pretty much it on this rifle. Go ahead and talk about the camo on this AR. All right, so let's talk about the camouflage on this AR-15. You know, it's all Krylon. I don't have any Cerakote or anything like that. It might have some Rust-Oleum, but you know what I mean. It's spray paint. And it works very well for my region. And I don't get real crazy about patterns or anything like that. I just try to break up the outline of the rifle using kind of natural colors from the environment. Now, next thing I've done is I've gone ahead and added this fish netting. This is just old fishnet. You can get it at like Hobby Lobby or whatever. And I just cut a chunk that would wrap around the handguard. And then on the bottom, you should be able to see that black bank line starting up here. And it just weaves both sides together, kind of like you would lace up a boot. And I know that's black. And black to me is really not a camouflage color for the most part, at least not in my region. It stands out pretty good. But I did it with this black thread or black bank line, so that way people, you know, could see how I did it. All right. And I also add just some like earth tone colored super tactical hair bands, so I can put some vegetation in easily. And then up here on the front of the scope, I do basically the same thing, just a little bit of fishnet, some elastic bands, so I have a spot to put a little bit of vegetation up here. And then importantly, on the objective of the scope, I've just used a little bit of scrim netting and used the front lens cap to kind of capture that in place. And I just cut out just a small center section of the optic, because that's where, let me adjust my camera real quick, because that's where the light comes in for the most part. And so the idea here is to hopefully break up a little bit of shine off that glass if there's any reflection, but also just to break up that solid black circle, because that's a kind of a target. All right, guys, so that's my Align 2 weapons, you know, for two different scenarios, a fighting scenario and a more permissive, less dangerous scenario. You know, I love having two different options because I don't always want to carry this rifle if I'm doing other things, but having a rifle that is similar in my mind to this rifle, I can do a lot of the same things with this one that I can do with this one, but yet I can do things with this one that I can't with this one. You know, kind of, I like having that option, and I like being able to consistently carry one rifle most of the time that actually suits the needs that I need it for. And if you want to gain kind of experience carrying your equipment, running your equipment in a wilderness, rural type environment, I highly suggest, you know, you check out my classes. I'm really not trying to pitch them to make money. I'm telling you they are the most bang for the buck that you're going to get in a lot of training venues. And so, you know, you're going to learn how to hike with your gear, how to shoot with your gear, how to live with your gear, how to do land navigation with your gear. I mean, you wouldn't believe how many people show up to my class and they look kitted out just like 9 out of 10 guys on YouTube, honestly. You know, they got the helmet, they got the PVS 14, they got the plate carrier, they got the little backpack, camelback thing. They got all the stuff, right? Because that's what everybody told them to get. And then they show up and they quickly learn how a lot of that stuff isn't helping them if they're trying to operate in that kind of environment, okay? So I'd encourage you to check them out, see if it's something that you could benefit from. You know, if you have questions, feel free to comment or shoot me an email, whatever you want to do. I'm more than happy to help. I'm not into this really for the money. Like I said, I'm kind of into this more just to help good people out. So anyways, thanks for watching. Have a good day.